Well, welcome back, everybody. For those of you who have joined us on our previous episode, thanks for joining us again. For anyone who sees this as the first time, you're going to see something a little different this week. Number one, we're live. We are live on YouTube. We're going to rebroadcast to Facebook for now. We may add more later. Um, for those who are curious, why are we live? Well, we are going to be live because we're going to be talking about live streaming. Let's just put it in black and white. This episode is all about live streaming. We're not going to do too deep of a dive onto the how and the equipment and things like that. But what we are going to do is we're going to talk about how we have done live streaming. We're going to look at some cheap and medium priced options, and we'll even give a glimpse into a higher priced option for those who are starting to experiment with it. The other reason we're live this week is for a reason that a lot of you are all too familiar with. Rob's got COVID. Rob, say welcome. Say hey to everybody.
Welcome to COVID Corner, everybody.
Yeah, we've all been there more than likely. COVID sucks. I hate to put it any other way. The bottom line is, it was kind of interesting because this was next in our lineup of episodes, and Rob got in touch with me and he's like, I've got COVID. And I'm like, you know what? I was wanting to live stream the live stream episode anyway, so let's figure out how. So, for those of y'all who are new or the ones that have seen our other episodes, those were some basic episodes. This one's going to get a little more techy. The reason is because A, we've got to live stream, B, we've got to cross communicate with Rob being isolated at home, and C, because we want to showcase some of these options that are a little more involved than just your audio. So, we're going to take a step here and we're going to talk about the why first. So, why do we live stream? I'm going to throw this over to Rob because Rob, A, is remote and he's in a perfect position as a consumer to explain what he's seeing on that end. And also because their church, as opposed to our church, is where we were about a year ago. So I would like to talk about his options first. So, Rob, take it away and tell why we live stream.
My church started live streaming years ago. We started that mainly because of the shut-ins, the elderly that couldn't get into church on their own and couldn't always make it. So we wanted them to be able to get the message and hear the word of God, have it shared and preached. So we started live. They started live streaming. That was actually before I even started coming to that church. That was already in place when I got there. It was really an important tool because it reached a lot of people that wouldn't necessarily be able to walk through the doors. And it was something that we were throwing back and forth, ideas on how to improve it and everything like that. And then COVID happened. And then when COVID happened, we never shut our doors, but the attendance dropped drastically, and a lot more people started relying on the live stream to get their message. And that's been one of the back and forth points as far as arguing for or against live streaming. A lot of people think that live streaming, or at least they've expressed the opinion to me that they think that the live streaming is preventing people from coming back because it's just too simple. The other side of that coin being there's people that wouldn't be reached without it. So it's been kind of debatable on that, but I still feel it's a very very valuable tool, and I feel it's definitely worth us taking a much deeper dive into um, to really help churches get everything set up to where they can reach a broader outreach with their message than just the people that can go through the doors. And the other thing that's really important is in today's world when people are looking at joining a new church, they most of them check the church's live stream before they even walk into the church, so they know what to expect. And that's another aspect that I think often gets overlooked.
That's a
What do
fair
you think,
point,
Matt?
and we deal with that at our church as well. And I've preached that for a while, for lack of a better term. A lot of people make decisions without ever setting foot, just to agree with you completely. And the media you put out there, it might not be the actual spreading of the word tool, but it is definitely an invitation type of tool that people will make their decisions about whether they're interested in you before they even step foot in, like you said. So I fully agree with that point. The live stream is one piece of that, but also there's other media and content you can put out there that people are going to check your website. They're going to look at your pictures. They're going to see what type of kids you got in your church. They're going to see what type of activities. So that kind of exceeds the live stream mandate, but it's a fair point. Um, On that note, I won't even speak to the theological debate of whether live stream is killing a church or helping a church. I can just speak to what we have dealt with. And yes, it did hurt. It has come back. Has it come back to 100%? Most churches probably haven't. Ours hasn't as well. We're getting closer and closer. But the reality in this conversation is if people are going to find a reason not to be at church, they're going to find a reason no matter what that reason is. So I'm not as concerned about those as I am, like you said, to reach the people, the shut-ins, the people that are disabled, the people that are for whatever temporarily disabled. I mean, people get into injuries and stuff, and they still want to partake. And some of our members even just go on vacations and they still want to partake in church. You need to be able to do that, whether you go to another church or interact with your home church virtually. It's important to me that you still interact with a church if you can. So there are valid needs even beyond just getting the message out there. But like I said, we won't delve too deep into that. Um, so that's in a nutshell the why we live stream. Now that brings an interesting point for this episode. Why are we live streaming? Well, it was kind of a joke, but it was an on the nose joke. We're live streaming to talk about live stream, obviously. But in this case, since Rob was out with COVID, it was a perfect example. I'm going to show you the tools that we're using to produce this episode because they're basically the same tools that you can use to live stream or do content like this for a church. So, one of the tools we're going to talk about, and I'm going to show you real quick. I'm going to flip to the other view. Um, so this is a view, and just to give you a little sneak peek into my world and Rob's as well, he plays with us here as well. This is our sound booth, and I'm going to turn the camera real quick. Um, this is a view that you're all too familiar with. It might look a little different, but at the end of the day, it's a stage, it's a soundboard, it's a lyrics computer, it's a screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this around real quick. You can see if you're familiar with it, we have a Behringer X32. We're using Faith Life's Proclaim. A lot of churches use ProPresenter as well. They're basically just a different package to do the same thing. But all of these components work together to make a live stream. The tool that I wanted to show you, though, is the one that I'm actually using live right now. It's OBS to produce this episode. So we use vMix for our actual live stream for our church, but OBS and vMix and Telestream, Wirecast are all basically the same tools. You just pay for a couple of them and they give you more bells and whistles. But I specifically just wanted to showcase this. And then I'm going to throw it back over to Rob because Rob's church is actively using OBS, if I'm not mistaken, to live stream their services. So I'd like to hear how they're using it. And then after he showcases what they're doing, it's going to throw it back, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing for this and how you can use that for your live stream. So, Rob, how are y'all using OBS, and what tools and things are you using with it to actually get your live stream out?
Basically, all we do we put a video and audio capture card in a laptop. We run our Actually, we've been doing it that way since we had the analog board. We just got the X32 not long ago, but we run the outs and we run a send from the X32 into the audio. We have two pan tilt zoom cameras that we run into the video through a switcher, and then that goes straight into OBS. And then from OBS, the only place that we broadcast is to Facebook. So
Gotcha.
we start streaming on OBS and just send the stream key to Facebook and let that capture it, and it just live streams it straight to Facebook. Not a
And
lot,
that's
not a lot, of, not a lot of issues with performance that we've had. So
that's good.
it's been set up, and it's not quite a free setup, but it's almost a free setup. The equipment that you buy is the only cost of doing it that way. I mean, you don't have to pay for
Yeah.
OBS. OBS software, and so is Facebook.
So that brings up a couple of key points that I'm going to hit on real quick. Number one is where do you stream? Some churches are Facebook only. Some, like ours, are YouTube and Facebook primarily. Some choose to stream to other platforms like Vimeo. It really just depends on your audience, but I can just speak broadly to the two that we use. Facebook is generally your medium to older audience, and YouTube is typically your younger audience. But from our experience, YouTube gives you a little better control of your quality. Facebook compresses and things. So that's just a little pointer that I throw out there is Facebook's the easy, the quick and dirty. It's free. YouTube's free as long as you're using software. They have limits on how many subscribers you have to have if you use it from a phone. So anyway, I'm not going to delve too deeply into that, but that's the where. But that brings up the second point. You mentioned yourself, y'all are using OBS with a video switcher with audio input capture cards. That's a step up option. OBS is a free software, but you can also do some free options as well. So I'm going to flip the view to this other, and I'm just going to show you a couple real quick. Here's an example of what he's talking about. So here's a microphone I use right here. This is a Shure microphone, but you can get pretty much any microphone. It's just going to be a quality difference. This can literally be put on an iPhone, which I would be using right here, but there's an issue with the version of OBS that I'm using. So normally I would use an iPhone. I'm actually using a different camera that I'll go into in just a second. But you can see, you can literally just put any microphone that's USB capable, plug it into OBS or plug it into your phone, and I can literally take my phone right here, one of the newer iPhones, and I can hold it up and I can literally live stream like this to Facebook or YouTube if I have enough subscribers. That's your bare minimum. When you consider how many people actually have a smartphone, that's the free option in my opinion, because almost everybody already has some version of a smartphone and you can just pull that puppy up if you need a microphone and do it. So now what we're talking about is the OBS, which is the step up. And then obviously you got Telestream, Wirecast, and vMix. We're not promoting any one over the other. It's just a question of how much you pay, what features you get, whether you're PC or Mac, that determines it. vMix is PC only, Wirecast is both, I believe. Um, so just a quick overview there. You'll also see I've got a tool that I'm going to go into in a minute, but this is a new tool to some people. Gamers have been using it for a while. Elgato is a company that has now used this thing called a Stream Deck. This has become one of my favorite tools because it's basically a button capability, and I can use it here to control OBS if I need to. So I could start and stop a stream, start and stop a recording. I can switch scenes in OBS. So these Stream Decks are very versatile. That's another low cost option to help. I believe if you catch it on a deal, these are around $130. They're $150 when you don't. So I know that's $150, but when you consider the scheme of things, cameras can be $2,800. $150 is a low cost option in this world. So, um, Rob, how does what I'm showing right here compare to what y'all are using? You mentioned y'all did it from an analog board and now you're in the digital world. Have you eliminated the audio capture and video capture, and are you going direct in digital? Or are you still using that?
We're still using the capture. Well, first off, I wanted to say real quick,
Sure.
as far as just live streaming straight from a cell phone, we do a lot of outdoor services. Like we have a tradition where when the weather cools down, we start doing drive-in evening services, and that's the church parking lot's full of cars. Everybody just drives up, sits in their car. The worship teams out underneath uh, the drive-in called the carport looking deal on the front of it, the balcony. Yeah, no, not the balcony, canopy. Yeah, and what we do is when we're doing that, we just set up a tripod with a cell phone on it, and we shoot that uh, straight to Facebook. So we do still use that method just for different things. It's really something that I've really come to enjoy over the years. But when we switch from the audio or from the analog to the digital board, we're still using all of the same capture card and everything, just because it was simpler to just, instead of having to redo everything, to just plug in the audio just like
I
it
get
has
that.
done. We're looking at different options to upgrade, make it look and sound better, because the sound quality on the streams really aren't that great, and the video quality is kind of iffy. Mainly because we're using older cameras. We're using S video cameras instead of anything digital,
You excuse me for a minute. I'm going to go throw up in a bucket. Give me just a minute.
and
Dude, I haven't seen an S video camera in a long time, so it's a nice little reality check to remember that old tech is still used, and use what you got. I mean, at the end of the day, if you got it and you can buy a little small input card versus getting a new camera, let's be honest, cameras are not cheap. That's a good example. As a point of reference, you're talking about you have the X32, but you kept the input capture card. So I'm not going to spend much time on it, but I'm going to flip back just for a second. Um, that's a good segue. So we obviously use the X32s as well. I'm not going to go into a deep dive on this board. We'll do that later in an episode because that's a good budget alternative for a lot of churches as well, and we're gonna focus on that in entirety. But a good digital board setup, mid level or above, will give you a set of digital outs. In this case, we have a USB output on the back that you could run in. and you can use USB digital audio. You can use a matrix. We'll go into depth in another episode. You can use a auxiliary out, like an auxiliary send. So there's a bunch of different ways you can get your live stream audio. But to Rob's point, that's always been a learning lesson that a lot of churches go through is, hey, we can live stream. Why does the audio sound horrible? Because fundamentally, there's one thing that in live stream you don't want to sacrifice on if you can get around it, and that is having a dedicated mix for your secondary media, like your live stream or your recordings. It doesn't mean you can't do a mix off of the board. It just means you've got one person who's responsible for mixing in a room, and that mix could sound completely different in another scenario. So when you go live and your audio sounds like it's in a room with a bunch of reverb and everything's mixed, that's because it literally is in a room with a bunch of reverb. You're adjusting for that. We use an X32 rack, and I'm going to flip to that view real quick. I'll go back to it a couple of times. But this is our broadcast room at the church where I attend. And this is a higher end setup. We've put a lot recently because of COVID into it, but the fundamentals are there. You've got a PC. These are two dedicated PCs because we do two different services. But there's two PCs. We've got multiple monitors so that you can see different outputs and things like that. The main thing, and I would have to walk in there to tilt it down, but there on the bottom right, there is an X32 rack console for each service. So what we did there is basically we take, and I'll flip back to it again, this X32 board from our live front of house, which we have another console version in our other sanctuary where we do our other service, and we just run the AES audio over a network cable into that room into an X32 rack. And then we have a person or persons, depending on the event, that will sit in there and mix the audio just like a front of house engineer for the live stream. And just so you can see, we have a set of studio monitors below our pictures there. Those are crucial in a broadcast room. So this is not the budget option, although it does fit into a budget. We definitely did not splurge on all of this, but the way Rob was describing is definitely the more cost effective, which is using OBS, bringing in your board mix, throwing a video camera that's decent or better depending on your budget. But the whole point of all this is just to lay out. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this, starting at near free and going all the way up to high end. So, Rob, I'm going to take a minute and throw it back to you. Before we go into the next steps of where do we go from here, what are the lessons learned that you've had with dealing with it on your end?
Um, Work with your limitations. Your limitations are there, so you've got to sometimes get creative. The We have pan tilt zoom cameras that have a little joystick controller. You can switch back and forth from one to the other. The biggest lesson I've learned was keep it simple. Instead of taking that joystick and using it to follow the pastor when he starts talking, what I do is I'll take one camera because when I'm not up on the stages as a worship musician or a worship leader, I'm up in the sound room running the cameras. What I'll do is I'll zoom one camera in really tight on the pastor, so when he's behind the pulpit and he's reading or he's teaching from there, you really get in close and personal with him. And then I'll keep the other camera, which is on the other side of the room, zoomed out so that you can see the whole stage. So that when he starts walking back and forth, when he gets excited, uh, it captures all of that and it doesn't lose him. And the reason that I started doing that is because it used to be just a wide angle shot at all times, and it never changed. But I found that the first time I ever watched the live stream there, I found that I stopped watching it and just started
Yeah,
listening to it, and I started getting a little bit distracted. Well, when I started running the cameras, I said, well, I tell you what, let's zoom in on the pastor so that it gets him more engaging,
yes,
because just because you're not there doesn't mean you don't need to be engaged. So I did that more as a method to help it bring everybody's attention and focus into what he's preaching. And I really think it's helped out a lot. But I started by following him back and forth, and then I'd find that I'd get distracted when something on the board starts flashing and he'd move out of the shot. So instead, now what I do is I just keep one tied in on him, one zoomed out, and we've got a switcher. So I just switch cameras when he starts moving out of the picture.
it's funny you mentioned that. We actually came to the same conclusions. We actually have, and I'll do a quick 180 real quick just so I can show you. Here we go. So we're doing this live, so bear with us. We're trying to do it, but you can see right there we've got an enclosed pan tilt zoom camera. It's in a gym that is also a worship center, so we protect it. So that's why it's in the enclosure. There's a center camera shot that doesn't it zooms, but it doesn't pan and tilt. And over by the TV there, that's our confidence monitor. There's another pan tilt zoom. So to Rob's point, we came to the same pretty much realizations as you need dynamic shots. You need to rotate your shots to keep people's attention. But that brings up an interesting point, and it's core to what we're talking about for live streaming is you have to remember what your live stream is for. You have to keep that in your head constantly. It might be a full production to some churches. Like remember back to the televangelist days when you got the evangelist behind the fiberglass pulpit, preaching it away. That was a production then. They had a production crew. They had camera people operating them and things. They had ESPN level audio, that kind of thing. Most live streams, as they sit today, are for secondary purposes only. In other words, the primary ministry is in the room with the pastor. The secondary is to reach the shut-ins, the disabled, the those who might be on a vacation. But the temptation is to try to turn a live stream into a production, and I fell to that temptation as well as I started spinning ours up more and more. Yes, we added more quality, we added better cameras, and it was very tempting to go up there and say we need better lighting, we need to do this. And one day I was just praying about it. I was like, do we really need better lighting, to the level of the movers and stuff like that? They serve a purpose. But when you're talking tens of thousands of dollars, it's really easy to get carried away. So, to your point, the dynamic shots are great. They keep people involved. But if you want to get to the level where you've got cameras on every musician and you're swapping between them constantly during a show, just for the production value alone, that's where I say take a step back, pray about it, think about it. Why is our live stream there? Because every camera you've got means somebody's having to operate that camera either virtually or physically in the room. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's really easy to want to get carried away with it, but the focus really is why are you live streaming? You're live
Yep.
streaming so that people, and you want to make it as dynamic as possible, but you also got to think that every $1,000 you spend on another camera, that could be going to a mission.
That's
So
a
there,
very good point.
and the biggest thing about budget worship is we want to help everybody work within their budget so that they can be responsible and not end up using money that should be going for missions for something like more cameras just to add production value. That's not what we're
Yeah,
about. We're about
that's
it as
key.
simple as possible, fix real world problems with a fiscally responsible budget.
Yep. And I'll use video news stations as one example. As a friend of mine's a weatherman, and or a friend of a friend, I should say, he ended up in his basement with a green screen and he had all the professional mics that they use in the studio during COVID and stuff. And I was like, that's awesome for a news company. That's their job, is to get that production level up. They have a standard that they've set. Not that a church doesn't necessarily need a standard, but the point I'm making is Rob, right now in his COVID situation, is a perfect example of what we're talking about, the keep it simple, stupid approach. We very easily could have said, hey, let's produce this a little better. Let's put a green screen behind you. Let's get you a better quality mic. And we did talk about trying to increase his mic quality a little. But at the end of the day, you have a message you want to get out. Do you really want to sideline it just because you didn't have the top quality microphone that you need, or just because you don't have a 1080p or a 4K camera or a PTZ camera? No, at the end of the day, it's about getting the word of God out and to the people that need to hear it. If your decisions are being based on whether you have the newest, latest, and greatest gear and things like that, then our podcast is not really for you. Budget worship. It's about doing worship right on a budget. So when I show you this shot again, I just want to use it as a perfect example. This took years to procure this equipment using a fiscally responsible or stewardship friendly budget process. I could have easily gone and said, let's go get some high end gaming PCs and a bunch of monitors and let's put these PTZ cameras in. But what we did is in our budget, one year we got cameras. couple of cameras. The next year we got them for our sanctuary. The next year we got one of these PCs for the primary service, and then when we added the secondary service, we got it the next year. We added the monitors in after. We used hand-me-down monitors until then. The X32 racks we added one at a time. So it's not to brag on what we did. It's just a point to get it out there that remember this stuff still is on a budget. And that's what we're about here at Budget Worship is there are better ways to do anything all the time. If you ever doubt that, go look at the documentaries on how they do something big like the Olympics or the Super Bowl from an audiovisual or a streaming. Oh my goodness. I was watching one on Netflix about the Olympics in Tokyo and how much cable they had to run just to get video for that thing. I don't have that budget. Do you have that budget, Rob?
And the other thing is another thing that I really wanted to hit on that you mentioned there was the amount of time it took to procure all of that. This isn't an overnight process. This is a process. If you're wanting to up your worship experience on a budget, this is a long term process. This is something that you commit to over the years. This isn't just a hey, let's get this idea, let's go, get all of this new equipment. I mean, you can do that, but really, if you're going to do it right, it takes time. You've got to build foundations first, and then you've got to build on those foundations. And it's a process that really takes a lot of commitment and a lot of discipline to be able to stick with.
Yeah, and I'll even make another point to that in addition to what you're saying. Even if you have an unlimited budget or a near unlimited budget as a church or a organization, it doesn't mean you need to go buy all of this equipment all at once and implement it overnight. A lot of companies, especially, are like that. Hey, we want to start live streaming. Go get me all the stuff I need to live stream. Yeah, I can go get you a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I can make it work. I'm tech savvy. There are people that are tech savvy. But just going and buying a bunch of stuff, you're going to learn a lot of hard lessons. When you take it over time, you're going to realize what matters at each step instead of just going and getting five PTZ cameras or five uh, capture cards or brand new boards across the board and go spend $20,000. And then you get halfway into the project and you're like, you know what? These aren't even compatible, yeah, that kind of thing. So there's wisdom in that doing it a little at a time anyway, because you'll get a few months in and you'll realize, yeah, we could probably step it up to the next level, but we're happy with what we got and we didn't spend that extra 5 grand or 10 grand or whatever it could cost. So there's definitely value and wisdom in that. Um, Anything else you want to talk about from y'all's perspective?
Something else that you need to keep in mind when you're wanting to upgrade your equipment is every piece of equipment that you upgrade, you're going to have to spend time learning how to operate it properly. So that's also putting stress on the team that you've got. So make sure that every upgrade that you do is really worth it, that you're really getting enough out of it to make it worth not only what you're stressing on the budget, but what you're stressing on your people. Because back when we were talking about the people equation, the people really are the equation, and you really got to make sure you're taking care of your tech teams, your audiovisual teams, your musicians. And part of that is not putting undue stress on them.
No, I fully agree with that. And that's not just live streaming too. That's your front of house team. That's the same thing, your lyrics team. Yeah, there's new tools that come out regularly. Yeah, there's new boards. Yeah, there's new software and stuff like that. So, ooh, let's jump on the new software. It's got these new bells and whistles. Well, that's fine as long as you're the one running it and there's nobody else because you got to train new people to do new things, existing people to do existing things. I could go out tomorrow and replace this X32 with a new $10,000 board and it'd give us a bunch of nice features. But does it do me any good if I'm the only one that can run it? No, because now I can't take a vacation. So yeah, it's all about the people and getting people that can help and keeping it simple. Well, if you got anything else, Rob, you got anything?
I think we about covered it.
Yep, we hope this was enjoyable. We're going to talk some more in depth on some of these tools. We're not. Our goal is not to create, what's the word, demos or walkthroughs of all the tools beyond the top tier stuff. Our goal is to showcase these are what you can use. This is how you can do it. I'm using OBS to do a cool little thing here for this, and I could step it up a little more, and I want to. But the reality is, I mean, how much time do you want to spend for a 20-minute, 30-minute thing, or for a 45-minute to an hour service every week? it's an effort thing. But anyway, the bottom line is this: we're going to do a deeper dive on some of these tools, specifically the X32s that we showed you, the racks in the back. We'll do a deeper dive on Proclaim a little bit. I was going to showcase, and I'll do it really quickly as we finish up. Um, Let me flip this view over. Ooh, that got up close and personal. So, for those who aren't familiar, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but what we use, oops, sorry, my tripod came a little loose. So, we use Proclaim, and you can use what's called a stream content output on it. ProPresenter has the same thing. So, for those of you who have wondered how the lower thirds type stuff works on streams and maybe just hadn't found it yet, if you're using one of these tools, there's a thing called an output, like an NDI output, that you can use transparencies. So that's another way that you can use existing tools to make your streams better without spending any extra money. I just wanted to hit on that real quick because I know that was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. Sorry about the vibrating camera, trying to move cameras around here. Let me flip back to the other. But anyway, if that's it, yeah, we're gonna finish up on this episode, and we're gonna in a future episode coming up, we're gonna be talking about some semi-related things, but we're gonna get into multi-track. So stay tuned for that because Rob's had some fun with that. I want to get him on that. He learned some lessons that I had to learn a couple of years ago, and I know he loved every minute of it. Right, man? So
Yes, I
anyway,
certainly.
we're going to wrap this up. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't want to take too much more of your time. If there's anything in this you like and you want us to delve into deeper, just leave us a comment, send us a message. Check out budgetworship.com for the blog, more information, possibly some reviews on some equipment, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody.